The black bride thought no one wanted her, until a lone rancher whispered, "Will you marry me?" as the bitter Colorado wind carried cruel laughter from the saloon behind them. The young woman with proud shoulders and worn carpetbag endures daily sneers from frontier townspeople who see her as nothing more than damaged goods, a failed mail-order bride destined for servitude or starvation. But the weathered rancher with haunted eyes and a grieving son recognizes something the others miss: strength, disguised as vulnerability. When a deadly winter storm traps them together and sickness threatens the most innocent lives, her hidden past will either save them all or destroy the fragile trust growing between two broken souls. Will prejudice crush their chance at redemption, or will desperate circumstances reveal the truth that could change everything? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The train's whistle pierced the November air as Evelyn Jameson stepped onto the wooden platform of Dusty Ridge, Colorado territory. Her worn carpetbag contained everything she owned. The crumpled letter in her coat pocket contained her shattered dreams. Three women in fine bonnets whispered behind gloved hands. Their eyes followed Evelyn's every step with cold calculation. She had seen that look before. It meant trouble. The boarding house sat at the end of Main Street, like a tired old dog. Mrs. Henderson, the proprietor, examined Evelyn from head to toe before naming her price. Double what she charged others. Evelyn paid without complaint. She had no choice. Word traveled fast in small towns. By evening, everyone knew about the failed mail-order arrangement. Her intended husband had taken one look at her photograph and changed his mind. The rejection stung worse than the winter wind. Evelyn found work at 3 places. The boarding house needed floors scrubbed. The general store required heavy lifting. The seamstress wanted someone to work the night shift. Evelyn took them all. Marcus Grayson owned half the businesses in town. His boots clicked against the store's wooden floor as he approached Evelyn, sorting inventory. His smile never reached his eyes. "You seem to be settling in well." His voice carried warning beneath politeness. Evelyn kept her hands busy with the merchandise. "Just try." When he did, he bought supplies quickly and left. His son Tommy never strayed far from his father's shadow. The child's eyes held sadness that seemed too deep for someone so young. The storm raged outside while people huddled near the pot-bellied stove. Mrs. Miller began coughing around midnight. By dawn, fever burned through her small frame. Her breathing came in short, desperate gasps. "Someone needs to ride for the doctor," Miller said. His hands shook as he touched his wife's forehead. "Can't get through in this weather," Grayson replied. "Doc's 3 days away on a good day." Evelyn watched from the corner where she had been sorting supplies. Mrs. Miller's symptoms painted a clear picture. The woman needed help soon, or she would not survive. "I might be able to help her," Evelyn said quietly. The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward her. Grayson's expression hardened. "What could you possibly know about medicine?" Mrs. Henderson snapped. Evelyn stood slowly. "My grandmother taught me about healing. I've seen this before." "Absolutely not," Grayson stepped forward. "We're not letting some unqualified person experiment on a sick woman." Miller looked between his dying wife and the woman offering help. Desperation won over prejudice. "What do you need?" he asked. Evelyn moved toward the medical supplies shelf. Her hands worked with practiced efficiency. She had learned these remedies years ago, sitting beside her grandmother's rocking chair. The lessons had saved lives before. She mixed willow bark powder with honey and warm water. The fever-reducing properties would help stabilize Mrs. Miller's temperature. From the herb collection, she selected echinacea and elderberry. Both would support the woman's struggling immune system. "This will taste bitter, but it should help," Evelyn said, lifting Mrs. Miller's head gently. The mixture went down slowly. Evelyn positioned the woman to help her breathing. She prepared cool compresses for the fever and kept watch through the night. Rhett observed everything from his place near the window. His son had fallen asleep against his arm, but Rhett stayed awake. He watched Evelyn work with quiet competence, while others whispered doubt. By morning, Mrs. Miller's fever had broken, had treated her like she had nothing to offer. Young Tommy stirred awake and looked around the store. His eyes found Evelyn organizing the medicine shelf with careful precision. "Pa," he whispered, "the lady helped Mrs. Miller get better." Rhett nodded slowly. "Yes, son, she did." The storm outside began to clear, but inside the store, new tensions were brewing. Evelyn had revealed herself to be far more than anyone had assumed. The question remained whether this small frontier town could accept a truth that challenged everything they believed. Word of Mrs. Miller's recovery spread through Dusty Ridge like wildfire. Some called it luck. Others whispered about dark arts. Evelyn ignored both and continued her work at the boarding house. 3 days after the storm, Rhett Landry appeared at her door. Tommy stood beside him, clutching his father's coat. The boy's clothes hung loose on his small frame. Dark circles shadowed his young eyes. "Miss Jameson," Rhett removed his hat, "I'd like to speak with you about my son." Evelyn set down her scrub brush and wiped her hands on her apron. "What about him?" "Tommy needs schooling. Been struggling since his mother passed." Rhett's voice carried weight that spoke of sleepless nights. "Town's got no teacher. Figured maybe you could help." Tommy peeked around his father's leg. His fingers traced patterns in the dirt with the toe of his boot. "I can read and write and do sums," Tommy said quietly. "But the letters get all mixed up sometimes." Evelyn knelt to Tommy's eye level. "That happens to lots of children. Nothing wrong with your mind, just needs different teaching." "You'd be willing to tutor him?" Rhett asked. "I'd be honored." The Landry Ranch sat 5 miles outside town. Evelyn rode out twice a week on a borrowed horse. The house showed signs of neglect. Dishes stacked in the kitchen, clothes piled in corners, dust covered every surface. Rhett had built the place for his wife, Sarah. Her death had left him struggling to manage ranch work and raise a grieving child. He did his best, but his best improving. Rhett watched from the kitchen doorway. He saw his son smile for the first time in months. Something tight in his chest began to loosen. During the 4th week, Evelyn arrived to find Rhett trying to manage a colicky calf while Tommy sat alone at the lesson table. The child had attempted to start without her, but frustration had taken over. "Numbers are stupid," Tommy declared, throwing down his slate. "They can seem that way," Evelyn agreed, "but they're just another language. Want me to show you a trick?" She gathered dried beans from the kitchen and spread them on the table. Addition and subtraction became moving beans from one pile to another. Tommy's face lit up with understanding. While they worked, Evelyn noticed Rhett struggling with account books at the kitchen table. Numbers covered the pages in untidy columns. Several calculations had been crossed out and rewritten. "Having trouble with the books?" she asked after Tommy's lesson ended. Rhett rubbed his forehead. "Never was good with figures. Sarah handled all that. I could help if you'd like." Rhett hesitated. Accepting help meant admitting weakness. But the ranch was failing, and pride wouldn't pay bills. "Appreciate that," he said finally. Evelyn examined the ledger with practiced eyes. Her education had included business arithmetic. The problems were fixable with proper organization and accurate calculations. She worked while Rhett prepared supper. Tommy helped both of them, reading from his primer while she balanced numbers, and his father cooked beans and cornbread. For the first time since Sarah's death, the house felt like a home. Other ranch families heard about Tommy's progress. The Hendersons brought their daughter Mary. The Coopers asked about lessons for their twin boys. Soon Evelyn was teaching 6 children in Rhett's front room. She organized lessons by age and ability, created learning games that made difficult concepts easier to grasp, watched quiet children find their voices, and struggling children discover their strengths. The parents paid what they could, sometimes money, often goods like eggs, milk, or preserves. Evelyn accepted everything with gratitude. Marcus Grayson heard about the informal school and didn't approve. He cornered Rhett outside the feed store on a Saturday morning. Between them, Rhett met Grayson's stare without flinching. "I'll keep that in mind," Rhett said, but his tone suggested he had no intention of changing course. Back at the ranch, Tommy showed Evelyn his latest writing assignment. He had composed a short story about a calf learning to walk. The letters stayed in proper order. The sentences made sense. "This is excellent work," Evelyn praised. Tommy beamed with pride. "Miss Evie, are you going to stay and teach us for always?" Evelyn glanced toward Rhett, who was listening from the kitchen. Their eyes met across the room. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with lessons or ledger books. "I hope so," she said softly. Winter deepened around Dusty Ridge. Evelyn's teaching expanded beyond the Landry Ranch. Word spread about her success with difficult students. Parents rode long distances, seeking help for children who struggled in traditional settings. The Williamson boy had never spoken a full sentence until Evelyn discovered he learned through music. She taught him to sing his letters and numbers. Within weeks, he was reading simple stories aloud. Little Beth Cooper couldn't sit still long enough for regular lessons. Evelyn let her walk around the room while reciting multiplication tables. Movement helped Beth concentrate better than any punishment ever had. Each success strengthened Evelyn's reputation. Each victory also deepened Marcus Grayson's resentment. He began visiting the parents of Evelyn's students. His message stayed consistent. Wouldn't their children benefit from proper instruction? Someone with appropriate qualifications and background? "She's teaching my Sarah to read better than anyone ever has," Mrs. Henderson told him firmly. "Results speak for themselves," agreed Mr. Cooper. Grayson's influence wasn't working as expected. Parents cared more about their children's progress than social expectations. At the Landry Ranch, changes went beyond Tommy's education. Evelyn's presence had transformed the household's daily rhythm. Meals appeared on schedule. Clean clothes filled drawers. The house regained the warmth it had lost when Sarah died. Rhett found himself looking with newer hope. Died trying to give Tommy a sister. Sometimes I wonder if I failed her by not getting the doctor fast enough. Childbirth takes women regardless of doctors. You can't blame yourself. Logical mind knows that. Heart's a different matter. Evelyn understood completely. Her own heart carried scars from losses that defied logic. "My parents died of fever when I was 12, she said. Grandmother took me in. Taught me everything she knew about healing and learning. When she passed, I had nothing left except education." "What brought you west?" "Hope, mostly. Thought maybe distance would matter more than appearance out here." Rhett studied her face in the firelight. "You were right about that." Their friendship deepened through shared evening conversations. Rhett spoke about ranch challenges and dreams for Tommy's future. Evelyn shared stories from her teaching experience and healing knowledge. Tommy noticed the change between them. His father smiled more. Miss Evie seemed less lonely. The boy began hoping for things he didn't dare speak aloud. December brought a new crisis. Diphtheria appeared in the settler community east of town. The disease spread quickly among families living in close quarters. Children were dying. Dr. Morrison had been called to Denver on emergency business. The nearest medical help was over a week away. Panic gripped parents as the outbreak worsened. "We need to do something," Miller said during an emergency town meeting. "Can't just watch children die." "What exactly do you suggest?" Grayson asked. "None of us are doctors." "Miss Jameson helped my wife during the storm," Miller replied. "Maybe she knows something about this sickness too." Murmurs filled the room, some supportive, others skeptical. "You want to trust children's lives to someone with no medical training?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "She has more training than anyone else available," Rhett said from the back of the room. All eyes turned toward him. Rhett rarely spoke at town meetings. His support carried weight. "The woman saved my wife's life," Miller added. Days, moving from cabin to cabin. Her grandmother's teachings guided every decision. Willow bark for fever, steam treatments for breathing difficulties, quarantine procedures to prevent further spread. Rhett stayed to help, bringing supplies and supporting her efforts. He watched her work with calm authority, while others panicked. Her competence reminded him why he had fallen in love with Sarah's gentleness. But Evelyn's strength drew him in different ways. On the fourth night, they sat outside the main cabin, sharing cold supper. Stars filled the winter sky above them. "How do you stay so calm?" Rhett asked. "Panic helps no one. Focus on what can be controlled." "Where did you learn that wisdom?" "Necessity. When you're different, you learn to manage fear early." Rhett understood. His own differences were less visible, but equally challenging. Widowed father, struggling rancher, man falling in love again when guilt said he shouldn't. Tommy had stayed with the Coopers during the medical crisis. When Evelyn and Rhett returned to town, the boy ran toward them with obvious relief. "Miss Evie! Pa, did you save the sick children?" "We helped," Evelyn said, lifting him into a hug. "She saved them," Rhett corrected, "just like she's been saving all of us." News of the diphtheria victory spread beyond Dusty Ridge. Families traveled from distant settlements, seeking Evelyn's help for their children. Her reputation as both healer and teacher grew with each success. The town council called a meeting in January to discuss establishing an official school. Parents had been requesting formal education for months. The informal lessons at the Landry Ranch couldn't accommodate everyone. Evelyn arrived at the meeting with lesson plans and student progress reports. She had prepared thoroughly, knowing this opportunity might not come again. Marcus Grayson entered the meeting hall with documents of his own. He had been corresponding with territorial education officials. His smile suggested confidence in his preparations. "We all agree the children need proper schooling," Mayor Davidson began. "The question is finding qualified instruction. I've taken the liberty of contacting slightly. Those institutions aren't recognized by territorial standards. The Freedmen's Bureau operates under federal authority," Evelyn replied calmly. Their teaching standards exceed most territorial requirements. Rhett rose from his seat near the back. Seems to me we should judge teachers by results, not paperwork. Easy enough to say when it's not your children at risk. Mrs. Henderson interjected. My son's been learning from Miss Jameson for months, Rhett said firmly. He's reading better than children twice his age. I'd call that success. Other parents began speaking up. The Coopers praised Evelyn's work with their twins. The Williamses credited her with their boy finally speaking in full sentences. She saved lives during the diphtheria outbreak, Miller added. That takes more than book learning. Grayson watched his support eroding. Gentlemen, we must consider what message this sends. Are we a civilized community with proper standards, or do we accept whatever convenience offers? The room fell silent. Everyone understood the deeper meaning behind his words. Rhett stood again, his voice carrying across the hall. I know what message this sends. It says we judge people by their character and abilities. Says we're smart enough to recognize talent when we see it. Mr. Landry, you're a respected member of this community, Grayson said carefully. But surely you understand the importance of maintaining appropriate social structures. I understand the importance of doing what's right for our children. The vote came down to education versus prejudice, fear of change against hope for the future. When Mayor Davidson counted the ballots, Evelyn had won by a single vote. Grayson's face hardened with defeat. This decision will have consequences. The Territorial Board won't approve funding for uncertified instruction. We'll manage without their money, Rhett said. After the meeting, families gathered around Evelyn to discuss school plans. Location, supplies, and schedules needed organization. The enthusiasm was infectious. Rhett waited until the crowd thinned before approaching her. Congratulations, Teacher Jameson. History lessons. Evelyn used local examples to make distant concepts relevant. A lesson about river systems included mapping the nearby Colorado River. History lessons connected territorial development to larger national events. Parents visited regularly to observe lessons. Most left impressed by the organization and progress they witnessed. A few remained skeptical, but couldn't argue with results. Spring brought new challenges. Several families requested that Evelyn tutor their children in advanced subjects. The territorial certification teacher that Grayson had promised never materialized. During this period, something deeper developed between Rhett and Evelyn. Their friendship had grown into something neither could ignore. They shared evening walks after school ended. Conversations stretched long into the night. Tommy noticed the change and approved completely. He had begun calling Evelyn Miss Evie, with obvious affection. Sometimes he slipped and called her Ma before catching himself. One evening in April, they sat on the porch watching Tommy chase fireflies in the yard. The boy's laughter filled the air with joy that had been missing from the ranch for too long. He's happy, Rhett observed. So are you, Evelyn replied. Rhett turned to study her face in the twilight. So are you. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Tommy ran toward the porch, breaking the spell. Miss Evie, look how many I caught. He held up a jar filled with gentle light. Beautiful, she said, but her eyes remained on Rhett. Later that night, after Tommy had fallen asleep, Rhett and Evelyn stood together in the kitchen. The dishes were clean. The lessons were prepared for tomorrow. Everything was perfect, except for the words neither had courage to speak. Rhett reached out and touched her hand gently. Evelyn didn't pull away. Evelyn, he said softly, Before he could continue, she stepped closer and kissed him. The kiss was gentle, full of hope and promise. When they separated, both were smiling. "I love you," Rhett whispered. "I love you too." Spring brought new hope to Dusty Ridge. Evelyn's school flourished with 23 students enrolled. The Territorial Education Board had finally acknowledged expression. He requested a private meeting with Rhett at the bank. The conversation would change everything. "Landry, we need to discuss your ranch situation," Grayson began, spreading papers across the desk. Rhett examined the documents with growing alarm. Tax assessments, territorial fees, and administrative charges he had never seen before. "What is this about?" "Your property taxes have been recalculated based on new territorial guidelines. Water rights carry additional fees now. Seems you owe quite a substantial amount." The numbers were staggering. More than Rhett could raise even if he sold half his cattle. His throat went dry as he studied the official seals and signatures. "These assessments are dated months ago. Why am I just seeing them now?" "Paperwork gets delayed sometimes. Territorial offices are busy places." Grayson's tone carried false sympathy. "I'm afraid immediate payment is required to maintain clear title to your land." Rhett's hands clenched into fists. "You know I don't have this kind of money." "Actually, I might be able to help with that." Grayson produced another document. "I'm prepared to settle your entire tax debt in exchange for your water rights and a small parcel of grazing land." "And if I refuse?" "The territorial government will seize your property for unpaid taxes. You and the boy will lose everything." The trap was perfectly constructed. Grayson had used his political connections to manipulate the system. Rhett faced losing his ranch or surrendering the water rights that made it valuable. "I need time to consider this." "Of course. Take until tomorrow morning. The territorial agent arrives Monday to begin seizure proceedings if the debt isn't settled." That evening, Rhett sat at his kitchen table staring at the documents. Evelyn found him there when she arrived for dinner. Tommy was visiting the Cooper children, giving them privacy to discuss adult concerns. "What's wrong?" she asked, noting his grim expression. Rhett explained Grayson's ultimatum: the tax debt, the impossible deadline, and the choice between losing everything or surrendering to extortion. "This is because of me," Evelyn said quietly. "He's punishing you for supporting my school. This is because Marcus Grayson is seized property for tax delinquency." After church services, several families approached Rhett with concern. Word had spread about his troubles. The community that had once been divided over Evelyn now rallied to support them both. "We could pool our resources," Miller suggested. "Help with part of the debt. Appreciate the thought, but the amount is too large. Don't want anyone else hurt by this." Evelyn listened to the conversations with growing determination. She had faced persecution before and survived. This challenge would not defeat them either. That afternoon, she rode to the territorial agent's hotel room. Agent Harrison was a thin man with nervous energy, who seemed uncomfortable with his assignment. "Miss Jameson, I presume. Heard quite a bit about you." "Good things, I hope." "Mixed reports. Some folks say you're the best teacher they've seen. Others question your qualifications." He shuffled through his papers awkwardly. "Truth is, the Territorial Board is impressed with your students' progress. Been getting letters praising your work." Evelyn seized the opening. "Then perhaps you'd be interested in reviewing the tax documents that threaten to close my school." She spread Grayson's papers across the table. Harrison examined them with professional attention. "These assessments seem unusually high," he admitted. "Water rights fees shouldn't be retroactive either. Could there be an error in the calculations?" Harrison spent an hour reviewing territorial tax codes. His frown deepened with each page he turned. Miss Jameson, these documents contain several irregularities. The water rights fees were never approved by the territorial legislature. The retroactive assessments violate established law. What does that mean for Mr. Landry's situation? It means these tax bills are largely invalid. Someone has been manipulating the system. Relief flooded through Evelyn, followed immediately by anger. Grayson had nearly destroyed an innocent family to satisfy his prejudices. What happens next? I'll need to investigate how these false documents were created. Someone will face serious charges for tax fraud. That evening, Agent Harrison confronted Grayson with evidence of the manipulation. Faced with potential criminal prosecution, Grayson's arrogant, the shelves' hope filled the air. "Evelyn," Rhett said softly, dropping to one knee. He pulled a simple silver ring from his pocket. His grandmother's ring, saved for the right moment and the right woman. "Will you marry me?" The silver ring caught the morning sunlight streaming through the schoolhouse windows. Evelyn looked down at Rhett, kneeling before her, his weathered hands holding his grandmother's precious heirloom. "Will you marry me?" he whispered again, his voice carrying years of loneliness and newfound hope. Tears gathered in Evelyn's eyes. This moment felt like a dream after months of struggle and uncertainty. The man she loved was offering her everything she had never dared hope for. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I'll marry you." Rhett slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. He stood and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the classroom while she laughed with pure joy. Tommy burst through the schoolhouse door, having spotted his father's horse outside. He stopped short when he saw them embracing. "Are you getting married?" he asked with barely contained excitement. "We are," Rhett confirmed, ruffling his son's hair. Tommy whooped with delight and threw his arms around both of them. "Does this mean Miss Evie will be my mama for real?" "If you want me to be," Evelyn said, kneeling to his level. "I've wanted that forever and ever." News of the engagement spread through Dusty Ridge faster than wildfire. The same townspeople who had once whispered cruel things about the unwanted bride now celebrated her upcoming marriage to one of their most respected ranchers. Mary Ann Jackson, who had initially questioned Evelyn's presence in town, approached her after church services the following Sunday. "I owe you an apology," the older woman said stiffly. "I judged you unfairly when you first arrived." "We all make assumptions sometimes," Evelyn replied graciously. "You've been good for this community, good for that family. I was wrong to oppose you." It was as close to a full apology as Mary Ann's pride would allow, but Evelyn accepted it with dignity. Wedding preparations began and facing trial. His departure removed the last obstacle to Evelyn's complete acceptance in the community. 3 weeks before the wedding, Evelyn received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Morrison had returned from Denver and requested a meeting to discuss her medical work during the diphtheria outbreak. "I've reviewed the treatments you used and spoken with the families you helped," he said. "Your knowledge of herbal medicine is impressive. Have you considered formal medical training?" "I never thought it would be possible. The Territorial Medical Board is establishing new guidelines for frontier practitioners. Your experience and education might qualify you for certification as a medical assistant." The possibility opened new doors for Evelyn's future. She could continue teaching while also providing medical care to families who needed it most. Rhett supported the idea completely. "You've got the skills and the calling. This community needs both." 2 weeks before the ceremony, Sarah's parents arrived from Kansas. They had traveled west to meet the woman who would become Tommy's new mother. Evelyn worried about their reaction, knowing they might struggle to accept her. John and Martha Brennan were older, conservative people who had loved their daughter deeply. They examined Evelyn with careful scrutiny during their first meeting. "Tommy speaks of you constantly in his letters," Martha said. "Says you're teaching him to read better than anyone ever has. He's a bright boy, just needed the right approach." Sarah would have liked that. She always wanted the best education for him. Over several days, the Brennans watched Evelyn interact with Tommy and manage the household. They saw how she had restored joy to their grandson's life and brought peace to their son-in-law's troubled heart. "You're not replacing our Sarah," John told Evelyn privately. "You're giving that boy something new, something he needs. I love him like he was my own." "We can see that." Sarah would be grateful. The wedding day dawned, clear and bright. October had painted the Colorado mountains in brilliant colors. The small church overflowed with families who had once viewed Evelyn as an outsider. Evelyn wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Miller had sewn with obvious care. Tommy walked her down the aisle, bursting with pride at his important role. Rhett waited at the altar in his bed across the town. Evelyn danced with her new husband, while Tommy spun nearby with other children. The same people who had once dismissed her now celebrated her happiness. She had not only found love, but had helped transform an entire community's understanding of worth and belonging. As the evening wound down, the new family returned to their ranch. Tommy fell asleep in the wagon between his parents, exhausted by the day's excitement. Rhett carried his son to bed, while Evelyn changed out of her wedding dress. When they met in the kitchen, both were smiling with quiet contentment. "Mrs. Landry," Rhett said, testing her new name. "I like the sound of that." They stood together in their home, surrounded by the life they had built through courage, patience, and love. The black bride who thought no one wanted her had found everything she had ever dreamed of and more. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. Tonight belonged to happiness and hope for the future they would create together.